I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's film block that we call Mummy Ho-Tep. In the year 1922, in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor, Egypt, Howard Carter and a team of archaeologists sponsored by Lord Carnarvon discovered the tomb of King Tutankhamun. The 3,000-year-old find led to a global interest in the mysterious legends of ancient Egypt. However, shortly after the expedition, Lord Carnarvon died of blood poisoning, leading some to speculate on the true nature of his death. One sensationalist account was that Carnarvon died due to a mummy's curse, alleged to be cast upon anyone who disturbs a mummy's tomb. In this case, it was a pharaoh's tomb, so, double whammy. And as you may have guessed, today's episode is all about werewolves. Werewolf? Is this right? I feel like we were talking about mummies. That's right, today we're unwrapping cinematic mummies from 3 decades of motion pictures. A group of archaeologists unearthed the tomb of a mummy who was awakened after 3,000 years. Posing as a rich eccentric, the mummy pursues the reincarnation of his lover. This is the OG Mummy film in all its glory and features the incredible Boris Karloff as the titular creature. Grab your popcorn and the nearest scroll of Thoth and check out The Mummy from 1932. Scoffing at the warnings of the locals, British archaeologists open the tomb of Princess Ananka and unleash a hulking 3,000-year-old monster. Hulking may be an understatement, as this punishing, puppeteered protector of pyramid tombs does his best to avoid using door handles and instead opts for walking directly through them. It's efficient, I'll give him that. It's Peter Cushing versus Christopher Lee in the 1959 Hammer film production, The Mummy. The Shady Rest retirement home has a different kind of normal. Its residents are convinced that they are the Lone Ranger, John F. Kennedy, and Elvis Presley. So when Elvis and JFK spot a mummy murdering their fellow residents, it's hardly a surprise that no one believes them. The two legendary icons join forces to take down the creature with fire and a poorly translated ancient incantation. Bruce Campbell and Ossie Davis star in Don Coscarelli's Bubba Ho-Tep from 2002. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
One of the lesser mummies is being circulated all over the United States. Museums, stuff like that.
What, you mean like King Tut or whatever?
No, more like King Tut's brother.
All right, welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster. Here with me, as always, is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Hello. Doing well.
We're recording this on a long weekend, which is nice. That'll probably be released about a month later. That's kind of how the schedule's been. We're trying to keep ahead of things. But this is another entry into our Halloween horror film discussions. And we're going to be focusing on a monster that kind of shows up in the Universal franchises with Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and things like that. But we're going to be discussing mummies specifically. We are watching 3 films. The Mummy from 1932, starring Boris Karloff. The Mummy from 59, the Hammer film starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in the title role as the Mummy.
And then 1999's Mummy, right?
No, and we're not watching the 99 Mummy because...
What about 2017's Mummy?
No, we're not gonna watch that one either. We're gonna mess
we'll
things
save those
up
for the next Mummy 2.
We're going to mess things up a little bit, and we're going to watch a movie about another mummy called Bubba Ho-Tep. This is Don Coscarelli's film, the acclaimed director of Phantasm and Beastmaster. Jeremy, this was my idea to come up with some mummy films, mostly, again, because I have never seen them before. I did see Bubba Ho-Tep before, but I never got to see the original Mummy. And I always wanted to see that, and then I definitely wanted to see a Hammer version of that, because I think that that's interesting that they had their renaissance as well, like right after Universal, or 20 years after Universal, and it was like they redid a lot of the things that they did. I grew up watching the Brendan Fraser Mummy over and over and over again as a kid, and even recently, I still like that movie. I think it's fun. But that was my only real adventure into mummy films outside of things like the Monster Squad, where mummies would show up. But when it was a real mummy movie, that was the only one. And so I knew Imhotep via Arnold Vosloo from our previous film
Right.
that we watched here, Hard Target.
See how much you actually love Hard Target upon reflection. Yeah.
I do love it. No, it gets burrowed like a tick underneath my skin. It was clear that the Brendan Fraser film is a direct remake of this film. There are a lot of matching beats and names, although they separated a lot of those names into characters, and I think we should go into that here. Really interesting how this film was set up. I had no idea that this was the story behind it, that a mummy is unearthed during a dig, and then he disappears several years later to come back as somebody named Ardith Bey, who people think is just some eccentric Egyptian art collector, when instead he himself is hiding out as a regular person in Egypt, or current day Egypt at the time, and he's trying to get back his magic scroll.
Well, didn't he have the scroll the whole time? Because he was trying to get the archaeology team to go out and dig up his girlfriend.
So yeah, similar to the Anck-su-namun in the current Mummy, which I think she's had the same name. I think they pronounce it a little differently in this, but Anck-su-namun. Yeah, very very similar beats. This is so. I guess the way that this film sets up is that you see this archaeological dig, and then it's literally 10 years later that this movie skips ahead within the story, and that's when Ardith Bey has already become sort of, a human walking around, as opposed to the guy wrapped up in bandages and decaying as a skeleton mummy. Kind of similar to how that new film had him bringing back his flesh due to killing, everyone around him, basically stealing their eyes and such.
I've only seen sort of meta products of mummy movies. I've never seen any of the mummy movies.
Me
I didn't
neither.
see the 32, the 59, the 99, the Scorpion King. I didn't see any of those movies. I didn't see the 2017. I didn't see any of the, I don't know what, spin-offs or whatever, the Mummy's Hand, the Mummy's Tomb, Abbott and Costello. Didn't see any of that stuff. So yeah, it was definitely fun going through all this. It's funny though, like watching this first one, the 1932 version with Karloff was, not what I was expecting. Like you're saying, like the mummy in this is walking around like sort of like a normal guy, just kind of a wrinkly face.
Doesn't like to be touched.
Yeah. He needs his own space, and they got to respect that. The thing is that when did the, wrapped in toilet paper mummy with his arms out, slowly stalking down the hallway come to be a thing? Was that also from the Universal world, or did that come in the 59?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's, worth looking up further, because this was not that film. This was not the zombie mummy walking around with the arms outstretched and, covered in bandages. We saw him in bandages in, two separate scenes, but both of those scenes kind of bookended his, path as being reincarnated, and then, finally going through his mission or failing or succeeding. We don't want to spoil the ending, but he doesn't make it. And what an ending! Kind of comes out of nowhere. He's just kind of dies, and that's about it. It's the end. But yeah, I thought this was interesting because Boris Karloff in this actually had a personality. He wasn't just some, monster that wasn't speaking or grunting or growling or anything like that. He was very intelligent, and he was like trying to take on these folks through more of an intelligent attack.
Right, and he had motivations and was driving the story, and it wasn't what one thinks of when you think of mummies, which is the bandaged, creature just stalking and harassing people. Yeah, what was interesting about the 32 one, the very beginning of the 32 was interesting. I love the opening credits.
Yeah, the miniature thing. Yeah, it was great.
The little model that you see that has the mummy on it. Also, then they were playing this piece of Swan Lake, which I thought was sort of, whatever, made famous in pop culture by in Dracula. And then they just kind of slapped it onto the front of this one as well.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of their thing, right? Universal's thing. That must have. I wonder if we watch Frankenstein and see the same thing.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, I don't think so. I thought there was a different theme there that they sort of were aping in Young Frankenstein and whatever. I was like, wow, that sounds really familiar, and I know that they had played it a lot in Ed Wood. It was weirdly familiar, and I had never seen the movie before, so it was bizarre. I had to kind of look that up. But yeah, the opening was really interesting to this, and then of course, like you were saying, archaeologists, find this thing, find the scroll that you're not supposed to read, and they do it anyway, unleashing this monster, and then we cut to, like you're saying, 10 years later.
Yeah.
And he's in there stirring up trouble by, hey, why don't you go search over here, which I know exactly where it's at.
Yeah, it might be over right here, exactly down here.
Right. So here's part I was a little confused about. So Helen Grosvenor, the woman that Boris Karloff is pursuing the whole time, he just thinks that she might be a reincarnation, right? It wasn't supposed to be the same person, even though in the flashback it was the same person.
So there were things that they said that hinted that she was a lineage of, or an ancestor of Anck-Sunamun, because they said her, she's half Egyptian, her mother was Egyptian, her family tree has many, many branches. I think that's how they put it.
Right.
So
but the guys that you're talking about there, like they were just talking about how her dad was the, I don't know what, colonial governor of the Sudan, who's English.
Right.
But, her mom is half Egyptian, or her mom is Egyptian, so she is half Egyptian.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to say, like, she's got, family and a long history of, obviously not Grosvenors. That would be her dad's name, right? But probably what if her last name is Tsunamin and they're still like questioning? Oh, it can't be her. There's no way.
Right.
But yeah, I think that they were hinting at she was the reincarnated, and even if she wasn't, it was still his motivation
his
for
madness.
Exactly. I thought that was really cool. I thought that there were some really interesting scenes with some animatronics from back in the day. Some of the statues would move, and there were small pyrotechnics that happened specifically in the climactic battle at the end against Imhotep, the mummy, or Ardith Bey, whatever you want to call him.
Right.
I don't know if you know the Ardith Bey character. You didn't see the mummy, you said, the Brendan Fraser one? Is that what you were saying?
No.
Okay, so there's a character named Ardith Bey in that movie too. He plays a totally separate character, and he's actually a hero in that. So I think that's kind of how they brought that into the more current film. Current 99.
It's pretty current.
I still haven't seen the original Frankenstein, so I'm kind of going out of order in terms of Boris Karloff films. But it was really cool to see that he was, like I said, more of an intelligent villain. He actually stood up to. He wasn't just some roaming monster, and so he did have this kind of back and forth between the humans, and in many ways he could have beaten them. I think he basically was into Helen because he thought she was Anck-Sunamun. It kind of ruined his whole. It made it his mission, as opposed to just. He could have taken over the world. He obviously had some really cool powers. He could see into the water and see where things were at. He had a lot of mind control things. So he could have been a really notorious killer. But instead, love kind of brought him back to the climactic battle.
Yeah, his powers were interesting. I wasn't totally clear on some of them, but it seemed like he had the Jedi mind trick powers.
Yes, he was a Jedi.
And he also had the Vader crushing your windpipe from a distance power as well.
So clearly this was an original Star Wars film.
Yeah. An interesting connection to White Zombie too, where it's like, he kind of gives it that stare and has a, puppet master like mind control piece of it.
Which in many ways this is a puppet master type story, right? At least in subsequent films, we'll talk about one of them today, but in many ways that scroll is used to control the mummy, and in many ways that mummy is like your zombie, and it's very similar to those original versions of zombies portrayed through like Haitian lore and things like that.
Well, in this one though, it's like the guy reads the scroll brings him back to life, and he was allowed to come back to life because what, he hadn't gone through the disemboweling and pulling the brain through the nose. And,
Yeah, he didn't have that final organ removed or whatever that was to finish off the process to the nether world.
and that allowed him to come back. If you read the magic words, once he had the magic words read, he was just alive and able to move about with his own will,
and very much alive.
He wasn't under the sort of auspices of whoever read it out, right?
Yep.
Watching it, now, was to see this sort of this pre-code movie, and and to see kind of where some of those cracks were, and I think a lot of it probably had to do with Helen Grosvenor's costume at the end. Which is kind of revealing, but then also at one point, I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the guys who was interested in her was like hanging out while she had kind of fainted, and she wakes up and she's like, oh yeah, said something about like, oh what, am I going to allow you to make love to me or whatever?
Right, they just met.
Oh, I know it seems absurd when we've known each other such a short time.
Don't you think I've had enough excitement for one evening without the additional thrill of a strange man making love to me?
They did. That was their first meeting.
Part of it was just the sort of acknowledgement that could exist or whatever. Like, it seemed like it was it was something that would be pre-code.
Yeah, he kind of sits really close to her, and almost too close while she's still a little bit, dazed from her, she's not feeling well. And then he starts talking to her, close talking her, like Judge Reinhold style close talking. And it was like, get out of her face. I felt so bad for her. 'Cause she's like, and then she says a line that, thank you for reminding me. She's like, do you always search around graves to find girls to fall in love with? She says something like that. That was in, I think it's called Welcome to Planet Motherfucker. It's a Rob Zombie song from, it's either Astro Creep or the original White Zombie album.
Oh, uh-huh.
But that's one of the
sampled
samples.
That?
Yeah, that's
okay.
one of the samples, and I didn't know when he played it. I was like, oh, all right, I'm gonna love this movie.
All these characters that are English, and at one point someone expresses their disdain that. Why did all these artifacts stay within, Egypt or whatever? These bastards, which should be in the National British Museums, whatever. And that's because, at that time, Egypt was a, British colony. In this one, Egypt was still under British rule. And in the next one, the British movie, it was right after they had been forced out. And you kind of like see some of that attitude in this where it's like, the guy's sort of discussing Helen Grosvenor's family tree, and just sort of how all of the people around her, right, her dad, was part of the colonial Sudan, English, of course, and then they talk about how it's disgusting that these Egyptians get to hold on to their own artifacts over here, and and are able to have their stuff in their museum instead of ours.
When in fact, like, the reason that they were locked down was to protect everyone else, right? These were some of these curses and things like that were made to be not to be broken or to be opened up. And it's like, yeah, there was a purpose for this, but it needs to be in a museum.
Right, exactly. I mean, I guess in the world of the horror movies, there's that part, like, sort of do not disturb this or awaken this evil of the Book of the Dead and all this, but also just in terms of like the sort of English colonial perspective, they had it more of that in this one, I'd say, than even in the next one. The 59 version, it is kind of similar in the sort of 1921 opening of the 32 Mummy. Getting confused here.
Yeah, I got you.
Someone does, say, kind of warn them or whatever, but that warning is made. There's more emphasis put on it in the 59 version.
Yes,
and it's one of those things where you can see that same superior colonial attitude in the 59 version, where the guy's like, "Fuck you, I'm gonna do whatever I want," and then 10 minutes later he's screwed. But but in the next one, they did kind of what you're talking about, like separating the Ardith Bay and the Imhotep characters, and like having the mummy be one character, and then the person sort of controlling the mummy, and
Mehmet Bey, I believe his name was in this one.
that's what they changed. Okay,
Yeah, but same character. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to say same character, but the same slot it fills as the character.
right. But they kind of like divided it from this guy being resurrected as a mummy to then being someone who's sort of controlling the mummy, the puppet master of that, and kind of believing and a what do you call it, a disciple of this ancient religion.
And this felt like a white zombie type controlling, or a film similar to that. Just basically trying to use this as a automaton. It's very similar, even though he gets a personality in some of the flashbacks. Christopher Lee really does play a bumbling zombie that Kool-Aid Man's his way through fucking everything to get in.
Right, exactly.
Like this guy cannot use the door, the handle. His name is Karis in this one though, so that he's a different mummy than what we were. Yeah, he's not Imhotep, but I still think he was a high priest. So same background pretty much.
Yeah, maybe they just didn't want to get sued by Universal, and they had to kind of change the names around a little bit.
Possibly, yeah.
But he has the like Duke, the Duke Phillips like thing, and the critic where he's like, let me show you out. Nope.
Would you like to stay in?
Nope. I'll show myself out.
It's funny because like Peter Cushing will be loading up his hunting rifle, ready for this guy to come in. You'll just see the shadow in front of the door, and then boom, this door opens up and he comes waddling in. But I thought he, this one was interesting too. I think that what I like about these films is that they all kind of go back in their own way into the mummies. Well, the priest as a living person during ancient Egypt. You get to see like where they were, their status when they were alive. Like some of those shots of Egypt, or ancient Egypt, I thought were really fun. But that's a really hard thing to produce. And especially watching old films like this, there's a lot of those like cardboard cutout sets that, have like those like rounded edges that look like Egyptian, but they're kind of like just background filler, and that didn't really look like a statue.
The really like the very opening scene, like after the credits, it's like it opens on like the sort of the Gilligan's Island set, and it's supposed to be like at the base of the pyramid.
That's exactly what it. And it's like if somebody would have leaned on one of those things, it would have totally slid over. But I think that's kind of, again, the charm with some of these old films is to catch stuff like that, and I can appreciate that. But
right.
Peter Cushing is a tremendous actor. He was definitely my favorite part of this film. And I really like the character of Mehmet Bey. I thought he was an interesting villain / white zombie controller.
Evil puppeteer.
Yeah. This one was interesting. So in this one, we've got John Banning, who the film opens like on the Gilligan's Island set. John Banning can't walk because he apparently broke his leg.
That's Peter Cushing, right?
Peter Cushing, yeah. And his father and his uncle are searching this tomb for Princess Ananka. And so this is a little bit different than Anuk Sunamun. And she's a high priestess of the god Karnak, and this is a big thing that comes up over time in the movie and is actually used as thwarting the evil person or getting the evil person to kind of reveal himself. They kind of called Karnak a pussy, more or less, and he didn't like that. So what that is basically this guy, Mehmet Bey, tells these archaeologists that they should not go in there. If this really is the tomb of Princess Ananka, there's a reason that she was locked up, and, this should not be disturbed. And of course, they go ahead and disturb it, and setting off a chain of events. In this instance, the mummy is controlled. The mummy is not a human. The mummy is absolutely a monster in this one. There's no mistaking it. So there's a big difference in this one.
That's true. Yeah, it's because they were able to sort of separate the priest and the mummy character. You could make the mummy more of a straightforward villain. It's just sort of a robot that attacks
a weapon.
People. Yeah, exactly. Almost so much so that it kind of has the T2 ending at the end there with him going down the bog. He's got the thumbs up.
Exactly. I was waiting for the thumbs up. And another like real hard cut to an end. It was kind of like he was in the water and it was the end on screen.
Well,
it was like that scared me more than any of the other moments in the films, like when the end popped up in both these movies.
Didn't see that coming, did you? Roll credits. I guess we're done.
That's exactly how I felt. I'm like, okay, I guess you told the whole story. We could just end it here.
Monster's dead. I guess the story's over.
I mean, I know from my experience of editing things prior, when somebody sees something hard cut like that, there's usually some smoothing out that needs to be done. Yeah. This could probably be the first draft. But yeah, I guess not in this one. Right. That was the end of it.
What else is kind of interesting, like this movie, so the 1932 Mummy, the Universal Mummy, takes place in the present day, essentially, because it was, it started off 1921, we cut to 10 years later, it's 1931. This movie, the 1959 Hammer Mummy, takes place in the 1890s, and then they also kind of fast forward a couple years.
3 years only in this one.
But it's 3 years. Yeah, so it's still in the 1890s, the sort of whole movie takes place in. It's interesting. I wonder if that has to do with kind of like what we were talking about a minute ago, which is that the sort of might of the British Empire is crumbling at this time. Like by I think the early 60s, almost all of their sort of large former colonies were gone and no longer under their control. Egypt being a big one, India, I think, a few years later. And I wonder if like part of this of like setting it back in the 1890s was sort of like, trying to have this nostalgia for this bygone era of like, when the British were in charge of everything, You get sort of the charming, Peter Cushing to be the face of that, and all of a sudden it sort of makes it work. Man, how much did Peter Cushing look like Wings era Steven Weber in this?
Very handsome. Yeah, I agree. I love Steven Weber, by the way. But yeah, Peter Cushing, he was a good-looking dude. He, like sharp, hair was completely done, like chiseled.
He didn't have the foul stench of whatever at this time. What was the line?
Yeah, I don't remember. For Star Wars, you mean?
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
You may fire when ready.
Charming to the last.
I love how in this one you get the sort of the mummy has this pinata head on him, and the mouth is covered the whole time, so he's not going to talk, and there is something kind of scary about him not articulating anything.
Yeah,
the Christopher Lee character, and then on top of that, just his sort of physical stature. He's a huge
person
compared to everyone else. And when Peter Cushing has to fight him, and he's like, okay, he's like stabbing sort of randomly in the body, and it's like not working at all,
not doing anything. But he was shot at the end.
Unloads both
though.
Barrels. Right.
So
just like in Bubba Ho-Tep, like this movie, it's like not clear like what takes down the zombie or the mummy. It's like
exactly.
Okay, well this time it worked.
Yeah. The way that it's described in Wikipedia is that once the mummy is entranced by Isabel, the woman that in this one he's in love with, or at least reminds him of his old
right.
Whoever that was, Princess Ananka. He's then shot and then sinks into a quagmire. It's taking the scroll of life with him, and it's like, but he got shot like 6 times.
Well, he sank into the bog of sadness from the Neverending Story.
Yeah, exactly. Artax. That's gonna blow out.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, exactly. And then he pulls the Terminator move. Yeah. But he goes down so easy at the end when in the middle of Peter Cushing's study, after he walked right through the damn window and the door, he takes like 2 shotgun blasts to the chest. Yeah, I think he gets blasted and nothing. Nothing. Walks right through it.
Right, and also takes a fire poker.
Yes,
through and through. It's like midsection.
Some pretty violent scenes in this. And I was reading on some of the little trivia about this that there were some really graphic scenes that they had to cut back to get this film into theaters. Really? But yeah, there was some extra stuff specifically around when Christopher Lee's mummy character in the past when he's getting the whole embalming done to him, and there's like those nasty scenes where you see the thing going up his nose and like all that. But there was supposed to be much more to that.
Tongue getting cut out or whatever.
Yeah, his tongue was cut off. Yeah, exactly.
Well, you do see some of that, right? But it's from behind his head or something.
Yeah, there's a little bit.
The idea is what they got the reverse angle on that one, and
there you go.
Got to see the viscera and the gore.
I thought that the really cool thing, and it kind of reminded me of the end of Batman versus Superman when they're like, "Oh, Martha, your mom's name's Martha too." But this one was with Isabel, and Peter Cushing's like, "Let your hair down."
Yeah,
and that was. Well, once she did that, it was all of a sudden now she was in control of.
Right,
I was going to say Emo-Tep again, but not Emo-Tep.
Whatever O-Tep he was.
Yeah, and then we find out what Ho-Tep
Karis.
Was in the next film. Karis Ho-Tep.
It's funny when the Christopher Lee mummy was going around stalking around Peter Cushing's dad, who was in the sort of old folks' home. I think
it was a mental hospital.
Hospital?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little of the Bubba Ho-Tep stalking the halls of the convalescence home in that one.
I bet Coscarelli pulled some tribute from those, and because I mean this guy's obviously a horror fanatic, so
right.
He probably pulled some of those.
But also like, just the way that he was wrapped up, and it like the wrapping was so precise and so uniform. In this one, it almost looked like armor, and it kind of reminded me of The Day the Earth Stood Still. We're expecting him to be like Klaatu
Barata,
Niktu.
And again, we're back to Evil Dead.
That's the medieval Dead. Thank you very much. How much funnier would it have been if they were able to name it that instead of Army of Darkness?
I'm glad they didn't. But I still would have loved it. A lot of stuff like we bring this up a lot with horror films, but I think the Lovecraft stuff comes into play here. There was a lot that he focused on with ancient Egypt and reading of scrolls and incantations and such.
Right, the Scroll of the Dead or whatever was very similar, I'm sure, to the Book of the Dead and a lot of those horror influences. Which I guess like that is an interesting thing. I wonder where all that comes from. Was a lot of this mummy lore just made up bullshit, or was it kind of based in some of the beliefs and things were in ancient Egypt and whatever?
If you're right about the legend, then this casket may contain the Scroll of Thoth.
From The Mummy 1932, which does not feature this lumbering, zombified, arms stretched out person wrapped in sheets that's going to attack you, or wrapped in bandages. This version, the 1959, really drives that wrapped up person home, or that image and iconography.
Right.
Now, Bubba Ho-Tep is a totally different kind of mummy.
Yeah.
And we get kind of a definition of what first of all what Ho-Tep means, which is nice after watching these first two films, because both of them have Ho-Teps, and it's basically a family name, a lineage name. I would assume it's kind of like Baron or Sir or things like that.
Okay.
Speaking of, from a specific dynasty range in ancient Egypt. And then Bubba, which is the definition, a good old boy, a redneck, a cracker. I could go on. A person that lives in a trailer park, I believe, is one of them.
Right.
So this is obviously the film that, doesn't really match up with the other ones. I figured when making this block that this one is an interesting film. It's a little bit more current, but it also just kind of throws the Egyptian mummy stuff into a weird parallel universe of of Elvis being alive, of John F. Kennedy being alive, sort of, and then this this nasty mummy comes back to haunt them all and to steal their souls.
As well as, I guess, the Lone Ranger, the Kimosabe guy.
Kimosabe, yeah, exactly. Assholes.
Also, I love that you described this as current. This
2002?
is 2002.
Yep, current
18 years ago.
I think it's because we probably should have done the Tom Cruise Mummy if we really wanted to do a current mummy film, but I have been avoiding that movie for over a year now, or 2 years.
Almost 3.
So in this movie, which is again directed by Don Coscarelli from Phantasm fame, Bruce Campbell is the lead in this with Ossie Davis. Easy for me to say now. And Bruce Campbell plays who he claims to be as Elvis Presley, who switched bodies at one time in time with an Elvis impersonator named Sebastian Haff, and switched sides with this guy Sebastian Haff, and so Elvis became his own impersonator for several years, while this Sebastian Haff fella went on as Elvis, finally died of a heart attack because he obviously liked to eat too much.
Half had a bad heart.
Half had a bad heart, exactly. And instead of holding on to the contract that said he could switch back with Sebastian Haff at any time, he accidentally burned it in some sort of grilling accident. This movie is bananas.
Yeah. In the previous two Mummy films, we get these origin stories of the mummy that's resurrected. In this one, we get like how Elvis came to be living in an old folks' home in the early 2000s.
It's another king.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There you go. I feel like that was one of the best parts of the movie. The origin story of the Elvis impersonator became Elvis and vice versa, or maybe not. Who knows? That's what we're presented, and we're kind of seeing it all from the Bruce Campbell character's perspective. It's not quite clear if he's just nuts like the Ossie Davis character is. Jack or JFK,
right?
Where his brain was replaced with sand, and they dyed him this color and all this. That he keeps saying.
Doesn't he deliver some funny lines? Ossie Davis,
it's so
he's
good.
really funny in this.
No, I Ossie Davis steals the show.
Absolutely,
in this one.
Absolutely.
I don't know why he's almost as funny as his role as the mayor in Do the Right Thing.
Mm-hmm. You've been talking about me for 18 years. What have I ever done to you?
You a drunk fool.
Besides that, the mayor don't bother nobody, and nobody don't bother the mayor.
It's not clear necessarily whether the Bruce Campbell Elvis is just as sort of diluted as the Ossie Davis character seems to be. Watching this movie again, I probably saw it in the theater 18 years ago, and the end of the movie where he's vanquished the mummy. Uh-huh. The stars align to say all is well, and he's like, thank you very much. Right. That ending, I feel like is like, okay, that's how they started the story, and they're like, okay, let's work backwards from there. How do we get to this?
Yeah, this one.
And this is what they
again. It's a mummy movie that kind of just ends. This is a kind of a bummer ending. I'd give this. I'd say we were pretty consistent on having bummer ending movies in our pod. We lose Ossie Davis, John F. Kennedy, Jack, and we also lose Elvis or Sebastian by the end, but not after a cool what do they call it? Automatic wheelchair fight, and a like a very old person versus a slow prodding mummy fight, which kind of. I guess the mummy was choosing to attack this old folks' home because it itself was very slow, and instead of trying to attack and chase after younger people that could probably outrun it, it was just going to take out the old people's souls. And killing them and stealing their souls was interesting too. Out of any orifice of the body, they could take a soul.
Particularly the asshole, apparently.
The butthole was where the mummy wanted to. I guess that's where it chose to remove the souls of the body. Just a very crazy movie. I really need to read the short story.
Oh, right. I saw that in the credits this time. I was like, oh, okay. It was based on a short story. I'd be kind of curious to see what the differences are. It's funny because, again, just like we're presented with this guy who claims to be Elvis still living, and this guy who claims to be JFK still living, we experience through their point of view what this mummy's up to and what the mummy's motivations are. And according to them, it's that to stay alive, you gotta, feast on the souls of other people, and these the old folks trapped in iron lungs and walkers and bedridden and whatever
that
else.
That evil old woman stealing that woman's glasses from the iron lung. No, that was terrible.
And a good day to you, sir.
We love your work,
Bulk
sir.
Of the series. Yeah. Not exactly a lightweight.
And a good day to you, sir.
Yeah, so, all of a sudden this mummy pops up out of nowhere and kills this old woman, this old jerk woman, and that's kind of how everything starts after she steals the glasses from this poor old woman in an iron lung.
Well, I mean, we start off, we introduce the rest home
with the same music every time. I don't know if you noticed that, but it was like a sitcom, and it was just like the same music every time they were exterior. Right.
Yeah. No, but we then meet Bruce Campbell as Elvis, and then we see his roommate is Private Ryan. It's like the and that guy's like choking, and then he dies. And then we kind of walk through the hallways, and we see the writer of Branded in the middle of the hallway. We see that old lady, snatch her glasses and say "fuck you," and then she gets
somethinged,
terrorized, but by that giant beetle thing,
the scarab. Yeah.
We come back to the Elvis room, and for me, that's where the story kind of starts. And I felt like that's where the movie should have started. It was like, okay, Private Ryan's already dead. The daughters, or a granddaughter, I guess, because she was a lot younger.
Here to throw out his purple heart.
Yeah. Just like piles all this shit into a
There's a
trash
purple
can,
heart.
Including
it's like the most honorable thing you could get, except for like the Medal of Honor. And she's going to toss it in the trash. He's like, can I keep that? Can I keep those pictures of him and maybe that purple heart?
I don't care.
Yeah, sure.
That's kind of where it feels like the story starts.
I would take this one step further, and I would start the movie when he meets Sebastian Haff. In that instance where Elvis is going to meet an impersonator, he just comes out, and all that is an indication that it's Sebastian is that little crumb of jelly donut or whatever it was on his face.
Right, the pie.
Right, the pie, yeah, the blueberry pie. And so he wipes that off. But I think that's where it could start, and then we'd be back into the retirement home 60 years later or whatever it was, or 30 years later. So, I think that's I know exactly what you're saying. I just think that they tried to set up too much, and it had this like slow prod at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's funny, like they kept cutting to the Daniel Roebuck team of guys, like tossing bodies into the hearse every few minutes, and like flipping over the banister and all this. I thought for sure that was going to sort of pay off, that those guys were going to come back later, and they didn't. Yeah,
yeah. I was kind of hoping that either those guys or Reggie Bannister makes a cameo in this from Phantasm. I was hoping that there was going to be something that paid off with those three. Specifically, I thought that maybe Reggie Bannister was controlling some sort of scroll of life, and those two guys were just taking those dead bodies out, but where they were taking them was to Bubba Ho-Tep, or like maybe they were trying to like pull guts from them or something Egyptian, pull the body parts out of, something like that. I was like waiting for more there. Yeah.
Yeah. That there was some sort of connection there. And we then see the either speculated or whatever origin of this mummy, right? It was
through telepathy.
Oh, right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was sort of very similar to the 59 mummy.
Yeah.
Where they're taking it on a bus, in this instance over a bridge, and in the 59 movie it's on like a horse and buggy or whatever, and it falls into the lake in Bubba Ho-Tep, whereas in 59 it fell into I don't know what, a tar pit.
Yeah, a boggy creek. Yeah, a quagmire.
Yeah, that was funny that that part was very consistent with the rest of the Mummy movies, where we kind of get this origin of the mummy. It's not clear why it was out here in East Texas or whatever.
No,
where they are.
Well, it was doing the rounds, is what they were saying. It said it was they were old, because the way that they put it was like, oh, this mummy is going to do the rounds at all the museums across the states. And then Elvis was like, oh, like Tutankhamun, and then Ossie was like, no, more like his brother. So it's kind of like some random mummy that they had that was just kind of making the rounds. But this one, unfortunately, was lost off the back of a bus and then resurrected. But I think it was resurrected by himself. He was just alive once he left the sarcophagus. I think in this one, the sarcophagus was keeping him at bay.
Keeping him dead.
Yeah, exactly. And then once the sarcophagus opened, that's when he woke up. It's very low budget film. I mean, they didn't get into a lot of that stuff. They didn't have that coverage. And I mean, I know I saw some behind the scenes of this film just doing some research on it. And Don Coscarelli at times specifically when they were looking to see where the bus had crashed in that river, where Bubba Ho-Tep was, and Elvis made his way down there to the riverbed there, he found that license plate. That was all filmed in Coscarelli's pool. And like there's a shot of him with a tripod and doing it himself, just setting that thing down and like dirtying up the water. So I mean, it's very independent.
I guess that's part of it, is like that the movie kind of fools you into thinking it's made for more money than it was, because like, you know, it had some production value with that trailer park explosion.
Yeah, that was a real explosion too. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was like right when they clanked the glasses, like or right when they checked. That was awesome.
No, it's great, because that's one of those things where you know that again, like sort of doing it differently, you know, if this were made maybe at least even just, you know, 6 years later from when it was, that would have been CG flames, and you know, wouldn't have been as convincing. But what's funny is you do get this idea that like, okay, it has Bruce Campbell in it, it has Ossie Davis, like it's not a movie of complete unknowns, so you would and it feels like it has a lot of production value. Like the mummy itself looks really good. I mean, the scarab thing wasn't so convincing at times, but
still, like, the sound design helped it along, though. I thought the practical effects were good. The mummy's face was awesome.
Right, exactly. It made it seem like the movie was more expensive than it was. I guess you're right. And the sound design and everything else, like we were talking about with the 59 mummy, the end, the sort of demise of the Bubba Ho-Tep in this one, wasn't very clear. They're like, okay, sprayed him with gasoline or whatever that was.
Makeshift flamethrower kind of.
Threw a Zippo at him, and he lit on fire, seemed to die. JFK dies of a heart attack, I guess.
Yeah, pretty bummer.
And then Bruce Campbell's like, all right, well, I guess this is done. And then the thing gets back up and starts chasing him again. The way he solves it is by
doing it again.
Dousing him with kerosene again and lighting him on fire again.
Right.
And then he falls into the lake, and it's like, okay, well, I guess it's over because the stars say so.
So again, we kind of missed like an opportunity, and I think that they just missed an opportunity because not only was it in the narrative, but it's also part of this mummy lore that we're talking about through these films, is that in this version, that scroll, or their version of the scroll, was the hieroglyphics just carved into the bathroom wall. Where Bubba Ho-Tep supposedly was taking a shit and shitting out old souls. That's how they put it in the movie. But in many ways, I think that was, and even though Ossie Davis somewhat translated it.
That's it? You bring me in here to look at stick pictures on the shithouse wall, man?
Now this top line translates roughly into Cleopatra does the nasty.
Say what?
That scroll was supposed to be, the thing that would, either put him back into catatonic state or whatever Mummy's in, a long-term coma or whatever they're in.
Right.
But that didn't really pay off. And I feel like that could have been the next step to, Elvis's killing of him. We tried to burn him once, but no, we need to read from the scroll to weaken him and then burn him. They kind of missed that elevation of plot.
Well, because he does read from whatever the scroll was. And he's like, this is fucking terrible. What are you
kind
kidding
of Evil Deadish too, right? Or Army of Dark. Like there was a lot of stuff in
Right.
there like that, but that one in particular, when he's like Klaatu Verata Niktu, he's like, he's like, couldn't say but yeah, it was the same kind of thing, and it was the same kind of reaction to. He's like, what the hell is this?
That's it. That's the chant against evil from the Book of Souls. Shit, don't even rhyme well.
That part I feel like worked really well. It's just that like they didn't come up with a way to get out of that, and it's funny because he says it, but it's not like it seemed to have that effect, even though it was ridiculous what he was saying.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that the comedic aspect of it was great, but. And I did like that Bubba Ho-Tep was talking shit in ancient Egyptian and would throw like artifact or the figurines or something out that were floating in space, whatever the hieroglyphics, yeah. And one of them was like, "I'm gonna kick your ass" or something, or "you ass wipe." And it was like one of them was literally like a guy with his ass hanging out as a hieroglyphic. I was like, that's hilarious. There's definitely a sense of humor to this movie.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Is like this movie, is mostly meant to be kind of fun and funny. Although they do spend a lot of time, like, he's regretting Priscilla, and there's that, sad guitar playing, and, like, it seemed like it was supposed to be, mostly pretty campy and funny. But then again, there's a lot of pieces of it where it's like, okay, well, that's obviously not what they're going for.
You mean it had a little bit more soul and emotion?
No, it's just that, like, they tried to put too much gravitas in it if they were going for a comedy or going for like this campy romp.
I think the only way they could have gotten out of some of that stuff, because he mentions Scylla specifically, and would she come and visit me if she knew I was alive? And I think they needed one more scene, where maybe he did live, and maybe he doesn't, Elvis, I mean, maybe he doesn't just see the stars say, it's all good, you're fine, and thank you very much. But maybe we should have had one more scene of him back in the bed, and somebody walks to the door, and we assume it's Priscilla from like an over the shoulder, and like maybe he could just see her, and that's how it ends. I think that would have been a better payoff for that too. I'm always trying to rewrite these things as we're watching them, because I think I think this movie is fun. I think it's very good. I think there's some great performances in it, and I think there's some really cool storylines to it. I just think it just missed being great.
I guess without him missing Priscilla and wanting to have his life back, and regretting where he ended up, they wouldn't have a whole lot of story left. But that's the thing, is like, they needed to sort of shape that at the script stage, and because they didn't have a lot of resources or whatever, and that was the part that wasn't working, was that where all those like beats went. I mean, like, it seemed like we were gonna have more of a character with the nurse, and then she just like disappeared at one point,
because she was great. She was another really good character, very good actress that I feel like just kind of disappeared. She didn't die, did she? Because I know she went out to have a cigarette at one point, and then that was kind of the end of her arc.
Didn't we see her later with Bruce Campbell's like, quit talking down to me and all this stuff?
That might have been the last time we saw her, when he talked.
I feel like that was
and there was no redemption for that too, even though they were friends. There was no redemption for that scene either. So there was supposed to be a sequel to this, and I don't know if you saw the end of this film, but they hint at. Next up is Bubba Nosferatu, Curse of the She-Vampires. Did you see that?
Wait, at the end of the credits or something? Or
I believe at the end of the credits, that's when it pops up. Yeah, and that was just meant to be a joke. They're like, but everyone kind of took that seriously, because everyone wants to see another Coscarelli movie, especially his fans. But that never happened. But there was going to be a sequel to this with the Elvis character coming back. Bruce Campbell didn't see eye to eye on where the script was going, but Ron Perlman was supposed to take over as Elvis, which would have been pretty cool. I love Ron Perlman. I think he's awesome. But, it's like anything else. Movies are all just stuck in development limbo forever and never really get done.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and on that note, we have watched and talked about 3 Mummy films. The 1932 The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff. The 1959 Mummy, The Mummy, from Hammer Films, starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, and Bubba Ho-Tep, starring Bruce Campbell and Ossie Davis, directed by Phantasm's Don Coscarelli. This is, again, part of our Halloween Octoberfest, that we are watching all horror films during this time. And we have 3, we're going to be focusing on anthology films next time, which this is one of my favorite kind of movies, just because it's little snippets of movies, and I like to not be, too engaged for something too long, because I have very, very short attention span. So the films we're going to be watching next week are Dead of Night, Creepshow, and Nightmare Cinema. Dead of Night is considered one of the very originals.
Yeah, it was supposed to be one of the early horror anthology films. Yeah, and I haven't seen it. It'd be interesting to check it out. And it's, not to be confused with the Bob Clark Dead of Night.
Right, not the Bob Clark Dead of Night. This is the one from 1945. Yep. Well, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
Surely you read about the princess.
How could you do that?
Had to. Science, you know. You will think me silly. And I sort of fell in love with her.
Do you have to open graves to